Welcome back to Creative Operations Europe 2022. This is the session Transforming Creative Production Workflows with Automation, hosted by Oliver Stewart, VP Sales, EMEA of Celtra. Oliver, thank you for joining us. Over to you.
Great, thank you. And good to tune in with everybody today. Pleasure to be presenting this. Like was said, I'm Oliver Stewart. I run the enterprise sales team here in EMEA for Celtra. And we're talking about transforming creative production workflows with automation. Now, just as a high level, some talking points of what we'll cover in the next 20 minutes, just so everybody knows what to expect. I think, based on this first agenda item here, which is the creative challenges of in-house teams, which we're going to go through, I think it's probably worth adding here that aside from the customers we work with, we commissioned research at the back end of last year to look at an extended pool outside of our customer group. So not those that have just drunk Kool-Aid, but also those that are assessing what their position is currently and how they want to move forward. So we'll look at some of those creative challenges up front. Then we're going to look at some of the causes for that, what's going on both externally and internally at the organizations that we're speaking to, and the feedback that we're getting from the brands that responded. And then on the back of that, we'll intro the concept of creative automation, how that works, what you should be looking out for, and then go through some practical use cases and, of course, a demo of the platform. So throughout this session, feel free to leave questions in the chat. I can't see them here and now, but I will circle back after with you individually. And of course, there's various opportunities in the platform throughout the day to pose more questions. But let's get started. So as I said, both within our visibility of customers and outside of that, the number one challenge that came up is this piece around no time for ideas, which I think is pretty sad given the environment and the opportunities that kind of exist for us. But the reality is that just the vast, like nearly 90% of marketers that are out there feel that their creative team just needs more time to devote to that creative process. The reality is everybody's trying to keep their head above water and literally get through the breadth and stack of work that they're presented with on a daily basis. So there's just no time to cultivate new ideas. The second is speed to market. And I think, again, this one is going to be very familiar to everybody. When you're trying to be creative at scale, you want your quality to be high. The compromise on that is you will operate, or has been that you will operate more slowly. So there's always that compromise between being fast and being high quality that we constantly see being battled within the brands that we speak to. And so this often is one of the biggest challenges that comes out from these conversations, which is generally there's a hunger for more refreshed content, but there's just not the process to efficiently get that out to them. And then thirdly is where the consumer feels the pain, I guess. And actually, I think this number is probably higher in reality. And it's one that we can all relate to, which is the consumer finding the assets, be that the promotions, the social posts, whatever that might be, they're repetitive and just a bit dull in terms of, spawning their imagination and reeling them in. And I think if I ask you this question is, how often do you see an ad? When was the last time you saw an ad that really grabbed your attention, pulled you in to that call to action? I know, speaking personally, we're often in this monotonous scroll through social content in particular, where in order for a brand to stand out, the reality is the consumer is very fatigued by the samey kind of content that's being put out there, very repetitive. And the brands that we're speaking to are struggling to try and cut through that noise. And that means they need to operate faster. They need to build greater quality refreshes on that content and do it consistently on an ongoing basis. But it's a real struggle. So there's just kind of three very top line challenges. And what is kind of emerging from this is this disconnect between those various audiences. At the beginning, you've got creatives which don't have enough time to produce new ideas and excellent creative, or as much time as they'd like. You've then got marketers that are hungry for content and refreshes, which is adding pressure there. And the consumer's the one that's, falling foul by the fatigue that they're getting on the receiving end. So there's this, what we've coined at Celtra, the creative gap, which is emerging. And just to run you through that a little bit more, is this idea of this exponential curve of demand. And this is coming in for a variety of different reasons: increased products, a greater demand for campaigns throughout the year, content refreshes, as we talked about, this explosion of channels and formats which are now becoming available, increasing, and then naturally this endeavor that everybody's on, this journey for greater testing and understanding of what works. This all adds to the demand. But unfortunately, the reality is that production resources have remained flat over the years, and they continue to remain flat. And so what happens is you have this void in between, which is the creative gap that we've coined. So that's kind of the first problem based on what's happening in the kind of external marketplace that's adding to these challenges. And then the second is looking internally, which is just this idea of inefficient workflows, which I know is a big topic in general for the audience here in today's event. And again, this is probably a little bit over the top, but it's there to depict the problem explicitly as possible, which is there are various steps in the process from concept through to final design and execution. And these are all hurdles and potential tripping points that you find within the process. So once you've got an approved concept and design built, you're then going through and copy and pasting that repeatedly. And I'm talking from a designer perspective, producing this for all those different designs, all those manual changes, exports, and so on, which are happening. Once that's done, you're then sending that out for feedback. It's usually, again, fairly manual and disjointed, email, Slack, various platforms where you're seeking that feedback, and across various teams, which are often fairly disconnected. Once you get that approval, you think you're done, but then somebody further up the chain notices that last minute change or that additional size that needs to be added, and you have to go all the way back to the beginning again. So it's particularly inefficient and very old school as a workflow. So we need to bridge the gap somehow between the market demand that's adding to the pressure and also these workflow challenges that you're seeing internally. And it's for these reasons we, over a good nearly 5 years have been running this creative automation for brands as a solution to both of these challenges. And essentially just very top level and very kind of clearly, 10,000 feet view here, it's all operated within the cloud, and it is streamlining that production process. It's a fully fledged solution to drive additional production and streamlined production, and it's all done in real time. There's no disjointedness between different platforms. The idea is that you can build, review, and execute and distribute all within that same platform. So the first pillar, of course, is production at scale. How can we help those designers get things produced more quickly, more efficiently, and with great control? The second is then, once they're ready for review, how do you collaborate and bring other teams into that process in a centralized way? And then lastly, of course, is once those are ready and approved and they're good for execution, how do you efficiently push those, and also pull all of the furniture that comes with those creatives from taxonomy and so on and so forth into the various ad networks that you'll be executing to those customers. So let's work through some use cases here just to kind of build a clearer picture. So an obvious one here is scaling across different formats, channels, sizes. So imagine as a designer, you'll receive that creative brief. Within that, you're going to have social, display, various different requests. If we're looking at social in particular, you might have Insta, Twitter, Pinterest. Within Instagram, you might have various sizes for that bite-sized content. And it's very easy for the designer to build once a master design and select all of the other various sizes that they will need, and the system takes care of the rest. And this is true for your static content, your video content, animated HTML and interactive HTML. It all can be centralized, scaled within the Celtra platform. The second, of course, is the idea, and extending from that, Once you've got that design in place, how do I localize that and do the transcreation, particularly operating as a global organization? So if we look at the design in the top left-hand side here, this might be your master, which is done in English, but then you want to translate that across all these various languages. You may have even noticed the slight design switch in terms of not only are you seeing, I think in this Hebrew in the bottom right, the text direction change, but also the design has changed here. So there's a variety of different rules that you can automate here, but it's separating the idea of design from content and using data to build out the iterations rather than leaning on designers to have to manually build those out. But this is another great use case, which is very common across those customers that we work with. And then thirdly, which is audience-specific variants. And I think right now, this is particularly low-hanging fruit in the market. And I think this is where a lot of our customers and others that are coming in really are trying to kind of jump on the bandwagon, which is you are, and we look at this in terms of dynamic product ads at the moment within social. So everybody's producing the same thing. They've got their content feeds linked up, but there's these boring products which on a white background, which is not popping at all. Everybody's missing it from a consumer standpoint. Imagine if you could enrich that with that same creative feel at top of funnel and make those products pop when you've got those customers at high converting level. This is a perfect example of using the scale of a creative automation platform to set those rules, plug and play, and really see amazing results off the back of that. And the second, of course, is being able to tag various elements within these module designs so that you can start to gain greater control of your testing and start to hypothesize different things and get feedback on what does and doesn't work. So these, again, are just some very high level examples of use cases that you can dive in and utilize straight off the bat. So with that, I'm going to dive into the demo here. And again, similar to, let me just exit here. And we've got this up and ready to go. Okay, great. So what you see here is the demo solution for Celtra. Now, the way that we're organized in Celtra is it's basically a project-based solution. So here I've got a single project. Of course, you'd have various projects within that. Some refer to these as toolkits, but essentially you're centralizing your designs, your content, etc., all to that single location. Now, of course, I won't go through this in detail, but like every good SaaS solution, you have access control, single sign-on, all the things that you would expect. Now, when I click into this project file, you can see here, it's then broken down into different design files. Within these design files, there's three key components. The first is the template, so the designs themselves. We then have the data feeds that drive the scale, and then your final creatives for preview and execution and so on. And we'll go through all of these. But just very quickly, let's say I'm here, I've received a brief and I need to, pull together a new design. When I open up the design, let's just go test, for example. Here, I've got the opportunity to translate my brief back to the designers or set these frameworks up so that we can get started. So again, I've got all of them here in the various sizes. These come pre-populated, but you can configure your own. And I can go through and select these, go forward. And then once I get here, when you're starting to produce content at scale, you then start to encounter other things like taxonomy and consistency of naming convention. So this is an area where you can start to do this based on content and layout so that you ensure that consistency across the board. But in the interest of time, let's go to one that we pre-baked. I'm first of all going to take you into the template itself. Once this loads up, I'll give you or walk you around the halls here. So you'll notice very quickly that the UI here is quite similar to others that you might have seen elsewhere, right? We've pulled and sprinkled elements from Adobe, Figma, Sketch, and then we're filling in the gaps as a modular first kind of creative builder and solution. So there's an abundance of things that we could go through today, and we don't obviously have time for that. So I'm just going to very quickly navigate you through this. So here we're covering all formats, and so we've got an animated HTML here. So we've got the timeline across the bottom, but in the same way as I go across to the statics here, and once this loads up, I can see I've got my static images, but my various sizes along here. So if I click through, I can see these. Now, to the left-hand side, these are all the areas for getting yourself sorted, organized. So it's where I can pull in the assets that I want to be using. I've got the various component parts, all drag and drop for ease of use. Information areas here. So for example, as a designer, I want to be focusing them on building those individual designs for those ratios that are different. But then once I have those ratios, I can come in here very, very quickly, add an extra one. So let's do 320 by 250, which is a fairly typical one. I can apply that, and that size is automatically generated. So there's no manual population, no additional manual work for the designer, super quick. They do a few designs and you're off and running. Now, coming around, going from left to right, you see at the bottom, we've got the timeline, but this is also mimicking similar to your layering, say in Photoshop or something like that. So if I go to CTA text here, which is one of the components, and these layers are representing all the components within this design that you might want to edit or link for adaptation. So let's say the CTA here is one of those, but you can see on the right-hand side, you've then got a variety of options for adapting that content, and that might be from cropping to resizing right through to typography. So nice little feature is adding your own custom fonts here, which can often be a challenge, but anything like padding and other design rules that you want to set in there. Another nice feature is you can also lock these in. So if you wanted to lock certain design rules to ensure that everybody, as you release this, is adhering to brand guidelines, that's all in there. We've brought across shortcuts for the designers, so makes that transition really easy for them. So there's a variety of things we can go into. I'd be happy to take you all through that in an additional session. But what essentially you have are these component parts, which are all connected to this central design. And now what I want to show you is how this links into the feed itself. Now the feed is similar to like an Excel spreadsheet. To the left-hand side, we've got various naming conventions and components just so you can organize yourself. And then to the right of that, we've got all of these tagged elements within the design, which you leave open for adaptation. So here we've got colors, we've got logos, we've got product shots, and there's also some nice features here with text formatting. So things like avoiding load words on lines and so on, just to make that workflow much faster. So for example, let's say I come in here and I want to just change this call to action. Let's go. Come up here, save that. Now, when I go back, what's going to happen is it's going to automate the updates on all of this within the platform. So if I go back to my design, you can see that there's been changes. I go through this. I've got 8 creatives which are being changed, and they're all being adjusted. When I go back, all of these would have been adjusted. I can then go and preview all of these within the platform. So you can see where I've made the change here, where before it was shop now, and now it's get it up here. And this will apply to all of the different sizes that are within this. So in the interest of time, I'm moving through it quite quickly. But this is just a really quick workflow as you go through. This is all then ready for distribution. I have commenting and so on ready to go here. And so I just want to switch back just as a recap, just because I'm conscious of the time here. And just want to make sure that we get these key takeaways for Celtra. So if you keep repeating it, automate it, that's one. It's cloud collaboration, which gives you much greater speed to market and content. And of course, you don't have to sacrifice, you don't have to compromise from design excellence or speed. You can have both in the one platform. and thank everybody for joining. If anybody wants to follow up on this and get into the demo in more depth, we can do so. There's my details. Have a great rest of the day, and I hope to see you in the rest of the platform.